And if you are a fan of abstract strategy games, I think you'll definitely want to check this one out because it has some really unique ideas. They look like a ton of fun. It also has a very simple rule set because the goal in this game is just to be the first player to get 3 more stones on the board than your opponent. And this one has a really interesting board because you're going to have all these different interconnected areas where you're going to be placing and moving your stones. Then there's going to be all these circular areas that represent different spells. And if you're able to occupy all the spaces of one of those circles, you'll be able to cast that spell at a cost. And then there's this area in the center, which is simply used to track if either player is ahead of the other player and by how many stones. But something that I really love about this board is that some of these spells are going to be represented by tiles, and you'll be able to shuffle these at the start of the game, randomly pick some, and then put them out on the board, which means you're going to have different spells available to you from game to game, which is going to give you a bit of variety and give you something a little bit fresh and something new to try and use to your advantage every time you play the game. And the way that the game actually plays is also very simple because this is a turn-based game where players are going to be alternating back and forth, and there's a few different things that you can do on your turn. The first thing you're going to do is just place a stone out on the board. And each player is going to be starting with a starter stone in their starter location on the board. But then anytime that you place additional stones, you're going to be placing it adjacent to a stone that you already have. And one thing to know when you do this is that you can place one of your stones onto a space that's already occupied by your opponent as long as they are adjacent to one of your stones. But when you do this, you don't necessarily destroy them. Instead, they're going to be pushed to the next available empty space, but they can only move either to an empty space adjacent to them or to an empty space that's connected to them by their own colored stones. If there's no option for that, then you will crush them and destroy that stone, and that will be removed from the board. This is definitely a key strategy to the game, so you'll want to be blocking off the different sides of your enemy stones and then trying to land stones on top of them so they have nowhere to go. And after you've placed your first stone, you do have the option to place a second one, but this one does come at a cost because in order to do that, you have to sacrifice any 2 stones that you have out on the board, meaning that you're going to have to remove them from the board, which is going to reduce the total number of stones that you have, but it might be worth it depending on the strategy that you're trying to complete. And the last thing that you can choose to do is to activate one of the spells that you're currently in control of. And like I said, in order to be in control of a spell, you just have to be occupying all the spaces on that spell. And if you are able to do that, then you can activate it. But when you do activate a spell, you actually have to sacrifice all the stones that you have on that spell. So this means that you could be losing a lot of stones, but the power of the spell does scale with the number of stones that it requires, which means that you're probably going to be wiping out a ton of your enemy's stones as well, or gaining back some stones as part of that spell to make sure that you are finishing out ahead. But there are a couple other things you might want to know about these spells, and that's that if you do control certain spaces on the board, those can actually allow you to gain back some of the stones that you sacrificed when you perform a spell. And the other thing is that some of these spells do not require you to sacrifice anything. When you have all the stones on that spell, it just gets activated and grants you a passive ability. So you can both get passive abilities or one-time abilities from these spells, obviously with the one-time abilities being a lot more powerful, but coming at a cost. And the game continues like this, with players alternating turns back and forth until one player has 3 stones more on the board than their opponent, and then that player wins the game. And if you want to know more, you can check out the link in the description and you can click to get notified.